Before we begin, a small unbinding. This episode is not here to tell you how to live, how to celebrate, or how to mark your time. It's not an instruction, it's not a rule, and it's not a judgment. This is a conversation, a remembering, a looking sideways at the things we were told were normal and asking quietly who they were really for. We'll be speaking about time, age, birthdays, ritual, and the subtle pressures we inherit without choosing. If any of this feels tender, uncomfortable, or familiar in your body, you're not broken. You're paying attention. Take what resonates. Leave what doesn't. You don't owe agreement here. We're not here to perform certainty. We're here to ask better questions. To start with, happy turnings, everyone. I hope you've been keeping well and that you've been looking after yourself. And welcome to season 2 of Bloodline, a story we forgot to tell. So, you've probably noticed that last season I was looking and talking a lot about time and calendars and clocks and what had been edited and rewritten and absorbed and how it makes us feel nowadays. More by personal experience of how I feel life nowadays and how I see life nowadays. So I'm very much learning to slow down and listen to my body and to myself more than paying attention to what is expected of me. I find that the world feels faster, louder, more chaotic. Everything is in a frenzy. We're made to feel we have no time to look inward and analyze what it is that makes us happy, content, and comfortable. As I said, the expectations from family, from society, from culture, all of that does weigh very heavily on some of us. And when the year turned, according obviously to the Gregorian calendar, which is already a whole thing, but still the year turned and another question just popped up. And again, from my husband. I do love his brain just as much as I love mine. Do you want to know what his question was? Just out of the blue. Again, as always. What is it with birthdays? And that song, the same droning melody, everyone sings it, every country, every language. And honestly, the length of it, I mean, the English version is almost mercifully short. But have you heard the Portuguese one? I always thought that it was the longest. It turns out I was wrong. And that was enough to send me down a rabbit hole, as always. And that's why this podcast exists, because my brain just goes into all these rabbit holes and I need an outlet. If you're still listening to me, I am so grateful. I don't know how you do it. And I hope you still continue to enjoy listening to my threads and where do we go. So I went looking and researching, where does happy birthday come from? Okay, so let's talk about that. There's something quietly strange about birthdays. Not just the celebration, but the fact that almost everyone, everywhere, marks them the same way. Same idea, same rhythm, same expectations. A specific day, once a year, where attention is supposed to gather, joy is supposed to appear, and gratitude is supposed to be performed. And yet, if you listen carefully, birthdays don't land cleanly for a lot of people. People joke about hating their birthday. They dread it. They want it over with. They feel awkward, exposed, heavy, and sometimes for reasons they can't name. Which is strange, isn't it? Because this is meant to be a celebration of life, of survival, of being here. So why does it so often come with discomfort? Why does a ritual that's supposed to feel joyful feel obligatory instead? Why do so many people feel pressure rather than pleasure? And why, if this is such a universal human moment, does it follow such a narrow script? A cake, a song, a performance of happiness, even when the body isn't on board. That disconnect alone feels worth pausing on. Because when a ritual produces tension more reliably than meaning, it's usually a sign that it didn't grow out of the people doing it. It was added later. So before we talk about feelings or psychology or personal experience, it's worth asking a more basic question. Where did this even come from? And the answer, weirdly, it isn't ancient. It's not tribal. It's not even folklore. It's paperwork and schoolrooms modern. To start with, there's a reason that song feels so strange. Happy Birthday to You has an origin, a very specific one. The melody was written in the late 19th century, in 1893, by two sisters in the United States, Patty and Mildred Hill. And it wasn't a birthday song at all. It was a classroom song. The original lyrics were, "Good morning to all, good morning to all, good morning, dear children, good morning to all." Obviously, in the tune that you're so familiar with. And that was it. It was written for kindergartens, for classrooms, for groups of children starting the day together. A simple melody, narrow vocal range, easy to remember, easy to sing in unison. It wasn't written to celebrate anyone. It was written to organize a room. And that part matters. Because in the late 1800s, melodies weren't treated as fixed or sacred. If a tune worked, if everyone already knew it, people reused it. They put new words on old melodies all the time. So at some point, quietly and casually, people began using this melody for birthdays. We can't pinpoint the exact moment that happened. There was no ceremony, no author, no official decision. It just emerged. What we can pinpoint is the moment it stopped being fluid. Around 1924, a songbook was published that printed the lyrics, "Happy Birthday to You," set to the Hill Sisters melody. That's the moment things changed. Not because anything sacred happened, but because once a song is written down, it stops being negotiable. Before that, the tune was flexible. Words shifted, context shifted. After that, it was frozen, printed, standardized, repeatable. And once it was printed, it spread fast through schools, homes, community halls, later radio, and later film and television. Not because it was ancient, but because it was now official. And then there's the part most people don't realize. For decades, "Happy Birthday to You" was treated as private property. Publishers claiming rights on behalf of the Hill family asserted copyright over the song, which meant that for much of the 20th century, films paid to use it, restaurants avoided singing it, television shows used awkward substitutes. You can still see the traces of that avoidance everywhere. And for a long time, no one questioned it. Until someone did. In the early 2010s, a documentary filmmaker was making a film about the history of "Happy Birthday to You" itself. And they were told they had to pay around $1,500 just to include the song. And that's when they stopped and asked a very simple question. Can you prove you actually own it? And that question led to a lawsuit. And when the court examined the evidence, the registrations, the songbooks, the paperwork, something became very clear. The melody "Good Morning to All" had been legitimately copyrighted at first, but that copyright had expired long ago. By the time "Happy Birthday to You" became globally dominant, the melody was already public domain. And the lyrics? There was no solid proof the Hill sisters wrote them, no clear original copyright, no definitive claim. They had been assumed, repeated, enforced, but never properly owned. In 2015, a US federal judge ruled that the copyright claim on the lyrics was invalid, not expired, invalid, which meant that for decades people had been paying money to use a song no one could legally prove they owned. In 2017, Happy Birthday to You officially entered the public domain. Anyone can sing it, anyone can record it, anyone can use it commercially. No one can charge for it ever again. Which is quietly extraordinary, because this song, the most sung song in the world, attached to one of the most socially enforced rituals we have, was treated as owned, without ever really being owned. The melody was theirs, briefly. The lyrics probably never were. And the ritual, that was never anyone's to claim. And once you realize that, once you see that this song was built to be repeatable, to keep voices together, to regulate a group, you start noticing the things people never talk about, like the length of it, and what that length does to a room. You remember I mentioned the length of it, right? That moment where I said the English version is almost mercifully short, and the Portuguese one feels like it goes on forever? I genuinely thought the Portuguese version was the longest, but I was wrong. The English Happy Birthday is about as contained as it gets. One short verse, 4 lines, barely half a minute if no one drags it out. And even then, a lot of people still don't know what to do with the ending. The Portuguese version already stretches things. It's 2 full verses. And it doesn't just sing, it involves. After the first verse, you don't get a release. You get more. More words, a name dropped in, a call for applause. And then the room usually adds its own layer. Hurrahs, chanting, shouting, laughing. It's not scripted, but it is expected. Which is why it makes it feel longer. Not because of the lyrics, but because the person in the middle has to stay open the whole time. And then there's Mexico. Over there and parts of Latin America, they sing Las Mañanitas. This one can have 3, 4, sometimes even 5 verses. It's slower, more melodic, almost poetic. It talks about dawn, about flowers, about fate and time. It's considered romantic, honoring, a sign of deep affection, which sounds beautiful until you realize that stopping it early is socially dangerous, because interrupting it isn't neutral. It's read as rejection, as refusing the honor, as embarrassing the people singing. So even if you're overwhelmed, you stay, and then you smile, and then you thank everyone, and then the room finally exhales. Other cultures do their own versions of this. In Dutch, the song itself repeats lines and names again and again, stretching the moment by repetition. In German, there are optional extra verses, and depending on the group, they'll happily add them. In Greek settings, the melody often flows straight into cheering and chanting, sometimes louder than the song itself. And the thing is, even in cultures where the song itself is technically short, the end rarely is, because the song does something to the room. While it's happening, everything narrows. Conversation stops, cutlery pauses, people turn their bodies. Eyes land in one place. One person becomes very visible, not in a gentle way, in a focused way. And there's a strange stillness in that moment, almost like everyone is holding their breath without realizing it. You can feel it in the pause between lines, in the way no one quite knows where to look except at the person in the middle. And when the song ends, that focus doesn't dissolve on its own. It just hangs there. And humans don't like that. Can you actually imagine the day where everyone will just sing the happy birthday song and after that is like silence? No cheering, no nothing. That is even weirder to think about because it's so alien, isn't it? Because every time happy birthday is sung, there will always be, hip hip hoorays and, he's a jolly good fellow and all those sort of things that add it on to that. That's because we're not very good at sitting inside unresolved attention. Silence right after collective focus feels awkward, exposing, like the moment hasn't finished yet. So someone does something. They clap, they laugh too loudly, they shout a name, start a chant, they make a joke. Not because anyone planned it, not because it's written into the ritual, but because it breaks the tension. It's like the room needs to move again so everyone can breathe. And once one person starts, the rest follow. Energy rubs off, inhibition drops, especially if there's alcohol or other mind altering substances, or excitement, or a lot of people feeding off each other. The noise builds, and for the group that feels good. It feels like release, like relief, like the moment has finally closed. But the person in the middle is still standing there, still being looked at, still expected to receive it well. They don't get to discharge the energy. They don't get to laugh it off from the outside. They don't get to redirect attention somewhere else. They're meant to smile, to nod, to say thank you, to absorb the ending so everyone else can relax. And that is the asymmetry. The group feels lighter because the noise lets them out of the moment. The person in the center often feels heavier because they're still inside it. Which is why for some people that part of a birthday doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like endurance. Not because anyone is being cruel, not because anyone has bad intentions, but because the ritual asks one nervous system to carry the weight of everyone else's relief. And once you see that, it becomes easier to understand why some people dread that moment, even when they love the people around them. Which brings me to the next question. If the song isn't ancient, if the ritual isn't ancestral, then what did our ancestors do instead? For most of human history, people didn't mark time by counting years lived, not because they didn't care about age, but because age wasn't the point. What mattered was change, becoming. Our ancestors didn't gather every 12 months to congratulate someone for surviving another cycle. They gathered when something shifted, when a body changed, when a role changed, when responsibility changed. Time wasn't something you accumulated, it was something you crossed. So instead of birthdays, life was recognized at moments of transformation. Those moments were witnessed, often by elders, often quietly, often with gravity, because what was being marked was not joy, it was capacity. You were now able to carry something you couldn't before. And this wasn't symbolic, it was practical. In many cultures, it still works this way. Among the Maasai of Kenya and Tanzania, a boy does not become an adult because he reaches a certain age. He becomes a moran, a recognized warrior, through initiation, endurance, and readiness. It's a life stage, not a birthday. The community decides when the shift has happened, not the calendar. In Hindu traditions, there are the samskaras, rites that mark key stages of life. Not yearly celebrations, but moments like first learning, adulthood, marriage, elderhood. Again, not how old you are, but what have you crossed into. Even today, many cultures still recognize first menstruation, first hunt, first child, survival of illness, entry into elderhood. These are not dates, they are stories. And the reason this matters is because none of this can be standardized. You can't schedule readiness. You can't automate becoming. You can't mass produce recognition, which means it doesn't scale. And that's where the shift begins. Because once societies move away from lived recognition, they need something else to organize people by. So age becomes a number, a requirement, a category, a metric. And once age becomes a number, it stops being relational. The calendar replaces the elder, the date replaces discernment. Everyone gets the same marker, whether it fits or not. And slowly, quietly, birthdays take over the role that community once held, not because they're better, but because they're easier. There's another consequence to this shift that most people feel but rarely name. As people get older, birthdays start to feel heavier. And it's not the cake, it's not the song, it's the number. At some point, the birthday stops marking becoming and starts marking distance. distance from youth, distance from relevance, distance from an unspoken ideal. You hear it everywhere. Don't ask my age. Oh, I'm dreading my birthday this year. Oh, I don't feel that old. Oh, please don't tell anyone the number. As if the number itself carries danger. As if being seen accurately means being seen as closer to the end. And we're trained into this fear early. Cover the grey hairs. Hide the wrinkles. Don't look your age. Don't be your age. Grey hair isn't treated as history. It's treated as failure. Which is strange, because bodies don't age randomly. They record. Every line is a season survived. Every change is adaptation. Every shift is a story that didn't end early. A body that shows time is a body that stayed. But once age becomes a number, the body becomes evidence, and evidence must be managed. So the message isn't aging is bad. The message is time must not be visible, especially for women, especially for anyone whose worth has been tied to youth, desirability, productivity, or softness. We don't say never ask a lady's age because it's rude. We say it because we were taught that a woman's time should stay invisible. So birthdays stop feeling neutral. They become a forced announcement, another year added, another number spoken aloud, another reminder that the system is keeping score. And of course, the other side exists too. Some people feel proud, grateful, rooted in the fact that they are still here. Another year lived, another year carried, another year not erased. Both responses are real. Both responses are valid. But it is worth asking why pride in aging has to be defended, while fear of aging is treated as normal. Because once age becomes a number on a calendar, instead of a story in a body, it stops belonging to the person who lived it. And by default, birthdays quietly become less about life and more about proximity to an ending we're taught not to name. And this fear didn't appear by accident. Once age became something that could be counted, it could also be watched, measured, judged. And when something can be watched, it can be used. Which is why some of the earliest recorded birthday stories aren't about joy at all. They are about power. The Bible barely mentions them at all, and when it does, it isn't subtle. The first birthday recorded in Scripture is in Genesis, and it belongs to a ruler. Quote from chapter 40, verses 20 to 22. And it came to pass the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. So far, sounds harmless, right? A feast, a gathering. But let's continue. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted them. So you see, a birthday marked by power, by judgment, by spectacle. One man lives, one man dies. Not because of who they are, but because the ruler decided this was the day to remind everyone who holds life and death. And that's the first birthday. The second appears in the Gospels, and again it belongs to a king. In Matthew chapter 14, verses 6 to 9, we are told, But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. Whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. And she, being before instructed of her mother, said, Give me here John Baptist's head in a charger, or in other versions, a platter. So we went from music, performance, a girl dancing in a room full of powerful men, to then a request, something that could not be taken back. And the text is very clear about what happens next. And the king was sorry, nevertheless, for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given her. John is beheaded, not because justice demanded it, but because a birthday demanded performance, because a ruler didn't want to lose face. Two birthdays, two rulers, two deaths. That's it. Those are the birthday celebrations Scripture preserves. No blessings, no coming of age, no communal witnessing of growth. Just power, image, spectacle, and bodies paying the price. And what's unsettling is that this pattern doesn't disappear. It just evolves. The birthday moves from palace to household, but it keeps the same architecture: spectacle, obligation, performance. And once a ritual like that becomes normal, a system can use it. So when capitalism arrived, it didn't invent birthdays, it industrialized them, which brings us to the mechanism itself. Once birthdays were fixed to dates, they stopped belonging to bodies and started belonging to systems. Because a date doesn't ask questions. A date doesn't notice if you're tired, grieving, overwhelmed, autistic, sensitive, private, depressed, or simply not in the mood to be seen. A date just arrives, and when it arrives, things are expected to happen: messages, plans, cake, presents, smiles, gratitude, even if nothing in you is asking for any of it. What's strange isn't that people celebrate birthdays. What's strange is how hard it is not to. Because opting out doesn't register as neutrality, it registers as absence, as ingratitude, as something that needs explaining. You don't just not celebrate your birthday, you decline it, you avoid it, you make a big thing of it, even when you're trying not to. And that's how you know you're not dealing with a personal preference anymore. You're dealing with enforcement. Look at how early the mechanism starts. Before the year has even turned, Easter eggs were already on the shelves. Christmas trees came down, chocolate went up. Season after season, ritual after ritual, stacked back to back. Not because meaning demands it, but because inventory does. Ritual used to follow life. Now meaning follows stock rotation. And birthdays slot perfectly into that rhythm, don't you find? They happen once a year for everyone, okay? There's probably not a single day in the year that someone's birthday is not celebrated. Everyone on a predictable schedule with built-in emotion, which makes them ideal, not just culturally, economically, because a birthday isn't just a day, it's a unit of expectation, a unit of spending, a unit of social obligation. You don't just turn a year older, you trigger a sequence: cards, messages, reminders, calendars alerts. Even the platforms know. Wish them a happy birthday. Don't forget. Celebrate. The system remembers, even if you don't want to. And then there's the performance. Because it's not enough for the ritual to happen, it has to be received correctly. You're expected to be grateful, to smile, to endure the song, to pose for the photo, to respond to every message. Even exhaustion has to be polite. Even discomfort has to be managed so no one else feels awkward, which creates a strange inversion. A day supposedly about you becomes a day where you're responsible for everyone else's feelings. Did they feel appreciated? Did they feel included? Did they feel validated for showing up? Joy becomes labor, and if you don't perform it convincingly enough, something subtle shifts in the room. People joke, people prod, people say things like, "Oh, come on, it's your birthday," or they say something like, "Oh, lighten up," or, you know, they're still the one, "Oh, other people have it worse." As if discomfort requires justification. This is where the mechanism becomes visible, because once a ritual happens on a schedule, applies to everyone, carries emotional weight, and is socially enforced, it no longer belongs to intimacy, it belongs to management. Not maliciously, not consciously, but effectively. Birthdays become a way of keeping time legible, people sortable, lives trackable. Another year added, another number logged, Another checkpoint passed. Survive itself becomes the achievement, not what you carried, not what you endured, not who you became, just that you made it another lap around the calendar. And when you don't want to mark that lap, when your body resists the noise, the focus, the spotlight, you're treated as if you're refusing a kindness, rather than noticing that something kind shouldn't feel compulsory. Which is why this matters. Because when a ritual can't be declined without social consequence, it stops being a celebration. It becomes a soft demand. And soft demands are the hardest to name. They come wrapped in smiles, in cake, in we're just being nice. But your nervous system still knows. It knows when attention feels like pressure. It knows when celebration feels like exposure. It knows when something is being done to you, not with you. And once you see that, once you feel that, it becomes impossible not to ask, what happens when we start listening to the bodies caught inside these rituals? And what happens when we realize that sometimes the most honest response is not participation, but pause? And this is where it stops being theory for us, because we had to face what this ritual was doing inside our own home. There's a moment that tends to come after awareness. Not immediately, not dramatically, just a soft sinking realization that you missed something. Not because you didn't care, but because you didn't yet have the language to hear what was being said. For us, that moment didn't belong to one person. It landed as a family. It came through our youngest child first. The way his body stiffened, the way his hands went to his ears, the way his smile arrived a second too late, like it had been taught, not chosen. At the time, it was easy to dismiss. He's just shy, he'll grow out of it. Oh, he's fine. Because birthdays are supposed to be fine. And when a child struggles with something that's framed as joyful, we're trained to smooth it over instead of slow it down. So we smoothed, we encouraged, we reassured, we nudged him through the song. And nothing terrible happened. No trauma, no dramatic fallout. Just a quiet moment that passed, and passed, and passed again. Until one day it didn't. Because once we started looking properly, we saw it wasn't just him. Our eldest had always felt it too. The discomfort, the exposure, the pressure of being the sole focus in the room. My husband said it for years, how awkward it felt, how uncomfortable it was to be sung at, how unnatural that spotlight felt in his body. And when we finally asked, really asked, both children were honest. They had always disliked it. They had always endured it. Both of them are neurodivergent, both in very different ways, which means that their bodies speak clearly, even when the world doesn't listen. And suddenly it all fell into place as recognition. Oh, this is what it's been doing. And with that recognition came something else, guilt. But not the loud, self flagellating kind, not the, oh, I failed kind, the quieter kind, the kind that says, oh, I see it now. And I want to be very careful here, because guilt gets a bad reputation. We are told to avoid it, to dissolve it as quickly as possible. But guilt isn't always the enemy. Sometimes guilt is just awareness arriving late. Sometimes it's attunement, catching up to experience. The problem isn't that we feel guilt. The problem is when we turn it into identity. I'm a bad parent. I should have known. I ruined something. That kind of thinking doesn't repair anything. It just freezes us in place. What repairs is listening differently next time. And that's what we did. We apologized to both children and to each other, not dramatically and not defensively, just honestly. We decided that from that point on to stop forcing the song. We have asked what would they prefer. We let silence be an option. We followed their lead. And something subtle happened. Their bodies softened in that moment. Not because birthdays suddenly became magical, but because their experience was no longer being overridden. And there's another layer to this that matters. You know already I didn't grow up with birthdays. They weren't part of my childhood. It was only in my 20s that my birthday began to be celebrated at all, which meant I was learning this ritual, and soon I would pass it on. That doesn't excuse the missing signs, but it explains how easily they were missed. And that's the part I want to name clearly. Children don't need parents who get it right the first time. They need parents who notice when something doesn't land and are willing to change. Repair isn't a dramatic apology. It's a behavioral shift. It's saying, I hear you now, and letting that hearing shape what comes next. And this doesn't just apply to children, it applies to all of us. How many times have we overridden ourselves because something was meant to be nice? How many times have we endured a ritual because opting out felt ruder than discomfort? How many times have we mistaken compliance for consent? If this episode brings anything tender up for you, regret, grief, a moment you wish you'd handled differently, I want you to hear this clearly. Awareness arriving late is still awareness. And repair doesn't live in the past. It lives in the next moment you choose differently. That is not a failure. That is learning. And I want to widen this here before anyone hears judgment in it, because that's not what this is at all. This episode is not asking you to give anything up. It's not asking you to stop celebrating. It's not asking you to cancel birthdays. It's not asking you to reject cake or gatherings or joy. It's asking something much simpler than that. It's asking us to stop pretending there's only one correct way to move through time. Because two things can be true at the same time. You can love your birthday. You can look forward to it all year. You can feel seen, held, celebrated by it. And someone else can't dread theirs. They can want it to pass it quietly. They can feel exposed, pressure, or raw. Neither of those experiences is wrong. Opting in is valid. Opting out is valid. Doing something small is valid. Doing nothing at all is valid, which is my favorite one. Usually on my birthday, my children and my husband are like, what do you want to do? And I say, nothing. No chores, no cooking, no nothing. And is the best day for me ever because we're all just chilled and just going with the flow on the day. Okay? Just do what you want to do. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Again, if you enjoy the partying, if you enjoy the social interaction, if you enjoy having your friends and your family and your loved ones around you, that is all valid. Absolutely. We have both worlds. But we also have to respect that other people do not feel the same way as us. We do not all fit into one box about it all. We all very different people. We all very sensitive people. We just have to be more human to each other and recognize that some rituals do need permission and do need awareness of how it makes the other person feel. What we're questioning here isn't celebration, it's compulsion. The unspoken rule that says you must mark this day, you must enjoy it the right way, you must perform gratitude on schedule. That rule doesn't come from joy. It comes from habit, from repetition, from social momentum. And when we mistake habit for meaning, we stop listening to the body. This episode isn't about replacing one ritual with a better one. It's about loosening the grip of the default. Because the moment choice enters the room, hierarchy leaves. There is no superior response to a birthday. There is only an honest one. If your body says, yes, gather, sing, celebrate, then go gather, go sing, go celebrate. But if your body says, please don't put me in the center, please don't make me endure that moment, then that matters too. No explanation required, no justification needed. And this matters especially in families, in friendships, in communities, because consent doesn't only apply to touch or time or labor. It applies to ritual. The most meaningful celebration isn't the one that looks right from the outside. It's the one the body can actually stay present for. So if at any point while listening you felt the urge to argue, to defend, to say, well, I love my birthday, good. That tells you something matters to you. And if you felt relief or recognition or a soft, oh, that makes sense, well, that matters too. There is room for all of it here. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about choosing awareness. And from there, choosing freely. So if we're not replacing one ritual with another, what's left? Well, nothing complicated. Just permission. Permission to let time be felt again. Permission to let meaning arrive without being scheduled. Maybe reclaiming time doesn't look like a new ceremony. Maybe it doesn't look like candles or words or anything repeatable at all. Maybe it looks like a walk, alone or with someone who knows when not to talk. Maybe it's a fire, not a performance, just something that burns while you sit near it. Maybe it's a meal, cooked slowly, shared without an agenda, no song, no center, just nourishment. Maybe it's a story, one someone tells about who you've become. Not how many years you've lived or how older you're getting, but what you've learned to carry. Maybe it's silence, an ordinary day, no marking at all. Maybe it's being witnessed instead of being sung at. None of these need to happen every year. None of them need to look the same twice. None of them need to be shared online or remembered by anyone else. Because the point isn't to replace the ritual. The point is to return choice to the body. To notice what actually feels right when the calendar stops shouting. Maybe we don't need new rituals. Maybe we just need permission. Permission to mark time differently. Permission to let it pass quietly. Permission to gather when it feels true. Permission to be alone when that's what's needed. Without judgment. Without pressure. Without feeling guilty. Time doesn't need to be conquered, or counted, or performed. It turns, and so do we. So wherever you are in your turning, you don't owe anyone a performance, just presence, and that is enough. So maybe instead of happy birthday, we say something quieter, like happy turning. Not because a number changed, but because something in you did, because you're still here, because you're still becoming, because time moved, and so did you. Not in a straight line, not on a schedule, not in ways a calendar could ever capture. Time doesn't ask to be counted, it asks to be lived. And living doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it looks like rest, sometimes like grief, sometimes like nothing at all. All of it belongs. So wherever you are in your turning, fast or slow, loud or quiet, marked or unmarked, you don't owe anyone a performance. You don't owe joy. You don't owe gratitude. You don't owe explanation. Just presence. And if you're still here, thank you so much for staying. Thank you to all of you that support me and that follow me. I'm really grateful to all of you. We might have some surprises this Bloodline season number 2. Again, we do not go straight in straight lines. We just follow threads, and the episodes come out of that, of questions that just pop in my mind and that make me go and research and go into rabbit holes. So who knows what is coming up this year, but there will be some different stuff for sure. We also made it to YouTube now, if that's your favorite thing. And no, my pretty face is not there, sorry. I am very shy for that. I haven't reached that point yet. At the point that I'm doing this episode is literally just episode 1 there with the art cover of the episode. I don't know. We'll just see what we come up with creatively. I did have a break. I did allow myself to rest before I even started thinking about season 2. When I finished season 1, I was seriously considering just maybe making a diary would be an option. instead of making a podcast. But I don't know. I just feel like sharing with you guys, I don't know, another ways of seeing and another ways of questioning because we are allowed to question. So if this stirred something or, if it landed softly or sharply, come and share your thoughts. And do know this episode was not done in judgment. It was simply done in awareness. So come and find us on TikTok at Wildly Woven or on Instagram at Bloodline Myths. Just come and say hi. There's no right response, there's no debate required. Just reflections if you feel like offering them. And there's another thing. We have the originals of the episodes on SoundCloud. Go pop over there and we have some originals, some personal originals. We have work that we have done with Viagens Obscuras in terms of soundtracks. Just give us some love and support. Give us 5-star rating. It would be really nice if you could also share it. If you know someone that would make sense of everything that I say, do share it with them. And lots of peace and love to everyone. Also, this season, the episodes will be coming out every 3 weeks. As I've mentioned before, we do have a lot of projects on our hands. So, to juggle all of this and still be able to spiral, we're out now every 3 weeks. Thank you so much for listening. And wherever you are, and whenever you return, happy turnings. See you next time.